So today we are going to be going over elements of plot, and if you would, go ahead and pull it up in Google Classroom. I'll show you how to get there. If you are on my home screen, you're going to want to click on elements of plot, and then we're going to start out with the note. So go ahead and click on this. It's got a little map on it. So as you're looking at this, I'm going to be reviewing it. You do have these notes accessible in Google Classroom. So oops, here they are. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it. And it's not wanting to zoom in. Okay, anyway, you can see right here, plot is just the way that a story is written. It is the structure behind how a story is written. And if you want, go ahead and read the definition with me. Plot is considered to be the literary element that describes the structure of a story, shows arrangement of events and actions within a story. So essentially, if you have any story, it will have these 5 elements of plot. And if you notice, our first one is exposition. We've got rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Now up here underneath the definition of plot, we also have a definition for conflict, because conflict is very important in the plot. Conflict is a struggle between opposing forces or the problems that arise. So in other words, if you've got an issue or there's a character that has an issue, that is going to be a conflict. There are actually 4 different kinds of conflict. There is character versus character, which is, you know, when one character has a problem with another character. There is character versus self, where a character might be conflicted in a decision that they have to make. There's character versus nature, where a character might be getting attacked or having to undergo a situation where they are outdoors. And then there is character versus society, which is essentially where a character is rejected by society. Society does not accept them. And in the novel that we are reading this year, you will be able to see a lot of character versus society. Starting tomorrow, Thursday, which is August 27th, we will be starting the reading of Stargirl. But anyway, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So if you notice, when you eat a Pop-Tart, a lot of people will either eat the crust first or break it off and eat the good stuff. So the good stuff is what we consider to be in the middle. And it's the same way with elements of plot. The good stuff of the story is going to take place in the middle, which is where our conflict takes place. It takes place in the rising action, the climax, and the falling action. Now we're going to go ahead and go over these definitions, and like the video that is attached, the YouTube video, I'm going to be referencing the movie Finding Nemo. So in the exposition, we are introduced to our main characters, and then we know the setting, which is the time and the place where the story happens. And if you need any way of remembering this, the exposition, the word expose means to give information on someone. So if you're exposing a person, you're giving information on them. And who will we be exposing? Well, we will be exposing our characters. Now, we know the who, we know the when, and we know the where. In a lot of stories, you will not actually know the when or the time that the story takes place. If there's anything that happens in it that you know could be in the distant past or the distant present, the distant future, like maybe there's technology in the story that we have not yet came up with, you can assume the story takes place in the distant future. If there's something in there that's an event that happened a long time ago, you can assume that it is based on in the past. And sometimes it'll give you a time, like a time of day, like sometimes it might say in the fall or in the daytime, in the nighttime. That is technically still considered a time, but a lot of stories will not tell you when a story takes place. So you have to rely on context clues, or sometimes there just might not be a time at all that you can say for that story. So when it is involving the setting, most of the time, it's just going to be the place where the story occurs. So in Finding Nemo, we're introduced to our main characters, and we know where they are living, and we can assume a time. So let's go ahead and elaborate on that. In the exposition, right here, we are introduced to Marlin, which is the dad of Nemo. We're introduced to Nemo, and later on in the story, we're introduced to Dory. So in the first part of our story, the story is taking place where? The place? It's taking place in the ocean, and then the time. So in that movie, there are quite a few things that exist in our time, like the dentist office and the scuba divers. So we can assume based on those clues that the story could potentially be taking place during the present. Now, the rising action, it says where conflict begins to develop and tension starts to increase. The main problem or conflict or struggle in our story is where Nemo gets captured and Marlin cannot find him. So this is where we start to see tension build. So it's going up, it's rising, and there are other instances in a story where you might have more than one rising action, more than one climax, more than one falling action. So a storyline might not always look like this. It could sometimes look like this, where there are continuous lines going up, almost like a heart monitor before it goes out again to the story resolving. So just to explain this, we already know our main problem of the story. Marlin wants to find his son Nemo, but then he encounters sharks, he encounters the sea mines, he encounters the jellyfish. All of these are conflicts that Marlin is having to face, but yet again, the main conflict is that he cannot find his son. So, the part of the story where the conflict is faced head on, that is our climax. And that climax would be, if it is in relation to him finding his son, where Marlin finally sees Nemo, Nemo's in the sea again, and Nemo and Dory are caught up in that net. So Marlin, this is the last conflict that he's gonna have to face. Am I going to get to see my son again? Is he going to be okay? Because Nemo is just telling him, trust me, Dad, you just gotta trust me. So, the falling action, Nemo is obviously able to get out of the net, and so is Dory. So it says, follows the climax, the conflict decreases. At this point, there is no more conflict that arises in the story, and our main conflict was that Marlin couldn't find his son, couldn't be with him. Well, the falling action, Marlin and Nemo finally get to be together. And then the resolution, you can think of this as being the solution or where the story resolves. It's essentially your happily ever after. So if we look at the resolution of that story, they go back home. They essentially have a happily ever after. And if you see happily ever after, that is your indicator that that right there is your resolution. So within the story, Marlin here is not the same father as Marlin here. And I say that to say this. The good stuff happens in the middle. This is where all of your conflict takes place. And in order for a character to change, they have to undergo this conflict. So here we can see in the movie that Marlin was a very overprotective parent. You know, he was worried all the time. He was paranoid. And at the end of the story, he is not those things anymore because of the conflict that he faced. So after we get done with this, you're going to go and watch this video, and then you are going to read this story. Whenever you read this story, so Three Little Pigs, Elements of Plot, you are going to do this practice sheet. So when you click on this practice sheet, it lists the events. It's taking a minute to load, but it lists the events that happened in the story. And you need to label which of the events is which. So I'm going to scroll down here. Give me just a second. All right. And it tells you the answer keys on the second page. If you want to go and check your answers, feel free. But I will give you a hint. After you read that story, if you can determine which event happened first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, so basically just put them in order of how they happened, then this is event number 1, event number 2, event number 3, event number 4, event number 5. If you're ever caught up on something like that, just remember they go in order. There's a reason that it's called a structure. That's why plot is the structure of a story. So go ahead and do this, and Friday you will have a quiz over the definitions and where these terms go on this right here. So you need to know the definitions of plot, conflict, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, and you need to know where each of these phrases will go on this diagram. Have a good one.